Good afternoon. 你好吗？我很高兴，我很高兴来台北。So you remember before I said that. Is it okay? Did you understand? Oh, okay. Okay. 我就会说。I'm learning a little bit. So, anyway, thank you. I believe we have translation. Is that correct? Or is it not here? Translation services? Okay. Okay. Well, anyway, I'll speak slowly, so hopefully you can understand me regardless of the language. Probably just hold this as well. So my name is Schalk, and I'm going to be speaking on a slightly more advanced topic of how to host OpenSocial applications. So if you were here earlier, we were talking about how to build OpenSocial applications and just a general overview of OpenSocial. So I touched on some of the similar concepts that I did before, but I'll drill down. I'll go into a little bit more detail on some of these topics here in this presentation. Okay, so here's the agenda. Again, I'll just touch on some of the concepts, high-level concepts in the beginning, and I will go through and explain how to host OpenSocial applications and talk about Friend Connect in more detail, and then I'll talk about Shindig in a lot more detail. Okay? So first of all, I like to use this slide because it's colorful and it's kind of neat. It's actually the daughter of a colleague of mine at Google, and the neat thing about it is that she actually understands the true intent of OpenSocial. And essentially, is to make the web more social. And so, as you can see here, she has some people, friends, interacting with each other and being more social. So that's essentially what OpenSocial's goal is, to make the web more social. And typically in the past, when when Google makes the web easier to use, the people benefit, and Google benefits. And so a lot of people, it ends up being a win-win solution across the board. So, just to continue back on where we were discussing the high-level concept of OpenSocial, as you can see here, before OpenSocial, we have a developer here, and he wanted to create applications that can interact. Essentially, he wanted to write an application that could work, and not just on one platform, but on multiple platforms. But the problem for this developer is that before OpenSocial, he would have to take his code and reformat it and change it entirely in order to be successful. So as you can see here, he's not very happy and he's scratching his head. So now the cool thing with OpenSocial is that it's standards-based. You have a core set of APIs for friends, profiles, activities, and now he's in a much happier state. And so when he goes to publish his application, he can take he's a happy developer now, he can take his same application and publish it on any website that supports OpenSocial. And so it's a single platform. So it's a very compelling thing for the developer, as well as the end users are happy because it provides essentially more applications by which they can use, thus, kind of pushing innovation as well. Okay. And so here's some of the many different OpenSocial partners that we've been interacting with. So some of these actually have live development environments. Some of them, they're still in early stages where they're still working with us to figure out what would be the best way that they can integrate OpenSocial. So whether it's traditional friends connecting or whether it's business associates connecting as well. So there's a lot of different ways that you can approach OpenSocial. So these are the companies that we're working with, fairly detailed on how to improve their integration or create like an interesting integration that makes sense for them. So let's talk about the actual content here about hosting an OpenSocial application. So first of all, let's talk about some of the options that you have available. If you want to be a social networking site, how would you build a hosting infrastructure? How would you build a social networking site that works with OpenSocial? Well, option one, and this is an option that several of our partners have actually done, is to write your own code. Essentially, you read the spec, you follow the specification, and then you write your own code that matches the specification. So there's some pros, meaning there's some benefits to this approach, meaning that you have maximum control over your own implementation. You don't have to wait for anyone else to provide a solution. And in a more general sense, you can also donate the innovations that you do back to the open source community, the open source community. Now, there are some possible downsides or some cons to this approach. One thing is that you're responsible for the entire 100% of the code. It does require more advanced software development skills. And you actually may have to rework some of the portions of code just to stay in compliance with the evolving specification of OpenSocial. So anyway, it's something that we see some of our early partners, they're continuing to upgrade their code to make sure that it stays in line with the specification as it's being continuing to evolve. Okay. Option 2. This is actually a fairly new option, and it's a very simple option. You can actually use Google to host your own OpenSocial applications for your own website. So in this case, it's meant for people who are just like a blogger or someone who has a very simple website, but they want to take advantage of the benefits of OpenSocial and integrate it very easily into their website. So in this case, what they can do is utilize the hosted service of FriendConnect, which is OpenSocial, simply log in, register a web application, and then from the dashboard or the control panel on the website, they can generate small bits of code then they can take that and insert it into their web page. So if you're familiar with Google Maps or the Ajax APIs, it's a similar approach where you have the website generate the little bit of JavaScript and HTML content, and you place that in your website. And the heavy lifting or the main work is still done by the Google servers from that standpoint. The other thing that's very neat about this is that you can leverage this technology to build your own social graph, your own social connectivity information. And so you can create your own new network of friends without having to do an investment of building your own database or your own architecture to store this information. You can just utilize this hosted solution entirely. And the cool thing is that people don't have to register. In the past, you would always have to build your own registration system, but here, they can already have a registration that they did on AIM, like AOL's Instant Messaging Service, or the Google accounts, or Yahoo accounts, or OpenID. And if you're not familiar with OpenID, OpenID is a kind of a unifying technology that allows you to create like a single identity on the web, and then you can use that identity that you can then log into websites that also allow OpenID. So it's an up-and-coming technology, but Google FriendConnect supports that as well. And then option 3, you can use a technology known as Shindig. And I'll be spending a fair amount of time on discussing exactly what Shindig is. So if you were here for my last talk, I went over the main things. It's server-side open source software that provides a reference implementation for code for OpenSocial. So you can download it, build it, run it, and immediately deploy it to use as an OpenSocial container or a website. And the pros, the benefits of this, is that you have a complete OpenSocial solution in a box, so to speak. This is an expression meaning that you don't have to do a whole bunch of extra stuff, but you just download it, plug it in, and run it, and you're generally running without too much effort. It's also excellent if you're a Java and a PHP developer, since the two versions of Shindig, or the two languages that it supports, are currently today are Java and PHP. We hope to have more people contribute different versions of Shindig so that it will work with other languages, such as Python or Perl or any other server-side language. So anyway, and it's also very customizable. Many of our partners who are using Shindig, they pick and choose, different aspects of Shindig that they want, and they plug it into their architecture. So it's very customizable in that sense. Some of the downsides that you may want to consider, if you're not fully comfortable with Java or PHP, you might want to hold off a little bit, or you might want to create your own implementation, or you're definitely welcome to create your own implementation and donate it back to Shindig. That's always well appreciated by the Shindig development community. The other side is that it is fairly advanced software development, so it does require a little bit more like advanced, know-how on how to build server-side technologies. Okay. So before I get into the more software development details with Shindig, let me just touch on the easy stuff. I'll touch on how to work with FriendConnect, and kind of show the contrast between how to work with Friend Connect if you're this side of the spectrum, like a blogger or just someone who has a web page on the web, as opposed to someone who's responsible for an actual social networking site's architecture. Okay. So Shindig, simply speaking, Shindig is a hosted OpenSocial container solution, meaning that Google does all the heavy-duty work for you in the sense that you don't have to build your own social graph engine. You don't have to create your own database of users. You don't have to really do much of anything other than just having it generate a little bit of JavaScript and HTML code for you. But it takes advantage of all the benefits as well. So here's an example. Ingrid Michelson, she's a musician. She wants to integrate OpenSocial applications into her simple blog. So I explained earlier in the presentation, she doesn't have to have detailed programming. She just takes an application that was written by anyone and loads it onto her website using Friend Connect, and then her own website becomes a social networking site where people can log in and register and comment and do things interactively. So if you're interested in Friend Connect, there's a web address that you can go and register, because it's still an early release, a preview release, but you can try it out and see if it works for you. And it's actually quite simple, so you can be up and running within a matter of 10 minutes or so. If you have a public website, like a blog or something like that, you can register it and it will generate the necessary code by which you can then try it out. So I definitely recommend, even if you are not even really in need of it, but you can always play around with the technology and see what it's like. So let me just do a quick demonstration. I'll have to step away from the light. So if you remember from the last presentation. Issue with the light. Okay. You're still there, good. So in this case, I have it's a new blog that I'm creating, and I'm just going to show you what I did to create a Friend Connect version of my website. So let me put this down for a second. So there's the website, Friend Connect, and you can log in. And in this case, I can go ahead and sign in if I'm already a preview partner. And it brings me to what I call the dashboard. So I can, if I wanted to create a brand new website, so I can type in the URL, like abc.com. Or the site name and the site URL. So you get the idea. And then when I hit save and test, it will generate the necessary code that allows me to test my website. So it just so happens that I already have two websites that I created earlier. And I'm opening up the website here. And as you can see, it's providing me interesting information like the total number of members over time, new membership. And then I can go back to my site settings and just check, is all my information correct? And there's the actual address for my Friend Connect website. And I'll show you what that looks like in a second. But as I build my website, I can go through and start browsing different gadgets that I can install. Like literally I can install any gadget. But in this case, the first thing that I installed on my website was this members gadget. And this is a very useful gadget that allows me to that lets people log into my blog site, and it creates its own social engine, meaning like it creates its own social graph of friends that can now connect within my website. Likewise, I can go through and if I wanted to add any website, I can go through and start pulling in like from this directory, or if I wanted to create my own custom gadget, meaning like if I wanted to, I could enter in any gadget URL. So if you're familiar with how gadgets work, you can just give it a location of a gadget. Like in the last talk, I showed like a couple of gadgets that I have hosted on my website that kind of explain the concepts of basic OpenSocial development. I can go ahead and generate the code for that, and then take that code and drop it into my page. Okay, so let me just go ahead and show you really quickly what my website looks like. This is just the simple web page. It's a new blog site that I've been playing around with. I'm using WordPress, so if you're familiar with WordPress blogging software, it ties into my MySQL database in the back. But I registered it in the wizard, and I had it generate the code for me, and I just took the snippet of code and placed it into a little, what they call a little widget, and there it is right there for me. And so at this point, if anyone goes to this website, they can sign in and become a registered user of this particular website. And if they sign in, they can use either their Google account, or they can sign in as a different user for that matter. So I'll click sign in again, and you'll see that it brings up like a more generic sign-in page. So you can use your Google account, Yahoo account, AOL Instant Messaging account, or OpenID. So OpenID, I mentioned a few times before, it's a nice unified way to establish your internet identity that can then transcend, individual websites. So it does away with having to create your own registration system, which is really cool because it doesn't, I don't need to know all your personal information. You can just sign in and become a member of my website, just like the Ingrid Michaelson musician can have a whole new social network of people who are interested in interacting on that particular website. So that's just one quick demonstration of using OpenSocial from a very simplistic point of view, from a hosted standpoint. Okay, and what I'll do now is I'll switch back into how to use OpenSocial from the more of the traditional development standpoint. So in that sense, this is where you would want to either consider creating your own infrastructure, or sorry, I'll stand up, or using open source software known as Shindig. Okay. So if you were here earlier, I explained a little bit about what Shindig is. It's the reference implementation for OpenSocial. It's primarily consists of a gadget server, OpenSocial data server, and it's really nice because it's open source. You can download it and get it up and running, and then without too much of a hassle, be able to integrate it within your environment and be successful in that sense. So here's a little graphic explaining the different components. You have your Shindig server over here, and then your website can have like a gadget or multiple gadgets that can be served or rendered via the Shindig server. So why would you want to consider using Shindig? Well, it's got a very strong open source community. It's got high quality production code, in the sense that there are a lot of our partners out there, and I just learned of a new partner today that's also using Shindig in a social networking site here in Taiwan. But you can use it today, plug it into your technology, and be able to be successful with it fairly easily. It's got built-in security for it. It follows the standard OAuth that allow you to have secure transactions for any bit of elements within your social networking sites. You just essentially utilize the technology out of the box. It's also compliant with the version 0.7 of the OpenSocial JavaScript API, and it's almost about to support version 0.8, which the specification came out not too long ago. And then also it's language neutral in the sense that the Shindig community is happy to have anyone contribute any other languages. But for today, it's Java and PHP, which is fine for this particular demographic of software development. But we're looking to definitely have other languages supported. Whatever will work for the community. So Python, Perl, or anything else out there, we'd be happy to include. So just to kind of get a feel for the components of Shindig, when you download the code, you get a number of subdirectories, folders, and then you can start looking through and seeing what you have. So first off, as you pull down the code and put it onto your file system just to get familiar with it, I would check out the high-level README file. And that kind of provides like some initial steps on how to get familiar with the software. And then as you continue on, you'll notice that there's some other files there, like a top-level Maven build script. And this is so Shindig, you'll find out very quickly, Shindig is integrated with some open source software development technologies. One is known as Maven. So Maven is the build infrastructure that Shindig uses. It's also integrated with Well, Shindig is hosted in a Subversion repository, so you would also need a Subversion client to interact with the server at this point. Down the road, when we start having like release builds, we'll just package it up in a zipped file or a tar file, and you can download it entirely if you want to have specific release. But in the early days of Shindig, which it's still kind of early, typically you'll just go ahead and have a Subversion client and download the code that way. As we move along here, there you can see the Java subdirectory. That's for all of the Java code that, if you're using the Java portion of Shindig, you can find it inside of there. Likewise, there's the PHP portion of Shindig today. And then JavaScript, there's actually common JavaScript that's utilized on both the JavaScript and the Java side. And this common JavaScript is simply the OpenSocial API itself. Since that actually is language neutral, you just have to have that data, that bit of JavaScript code transported to the end client, and then that will be able to communicate back to the server. Some other areas that you need to be familiar with, like the configuration folder, there you can define further like specific environment variables and things like that within your environment. If you're just running it out of the box, you don't even have to do anything here. But if you want to like take your Shindig environment and place it into, say, a Java EE enterprise server where you have like a named context root. I don't want to go over your head or anything, but basically you have to go in and start configuring a few things just so you're aware about it. And that's pretty much it for that one. Moving on, let me just go ahead and give you a quick demonstration of how to work with Shindig. I'll do a little bit more than what I did last time. Okay. So of course the first thing you want to do is go to the website, which is incubator.apache.org/Shindig. And it has all the information here on how to get started. There's also, if you use Eclipse for Java developers, information here that explains how to use the Eclipse Maven plugin and then be able to use Eclipse where you can run it, have the code start up within Eclipse, and also debug the code as you're going through it. So anyway, definitely recommend checking out the website first of all. And the other thing that I did was, before the presentation, I pulled down a build of Shindig today just to try it out. And it's actually fairly easy to do. I happen to have Subversion and I have Maven as well as the JDK, and I pulled it down and I can get it up and running very quickly. So in this case, I just fire up the server, and it's using an embedded Jetty server, which is an open source, very small Java-based server runtime. So anyway, it's funny, sometimes it doesn't take very much time, sometimes it goes through and downloads the specific extensions. Anyway, so it should be coming up in a second, and then I can flip over to my browser. And now it's telling me that it's live on port 8080. Oh, there we go. So if I were to go just at the top level, there's my local host. So now I'm running locally, and there's a subdirectory called gadgets there. And inside there, there's a files directory. And if you want to see like a basic example of a sample container, there's this little example here that shows the basic information of the server. And you notice here there's a URL pointing to a state, like state data. So this is actually social graph information, and I'm going to explain that further on how you can customize this. So this particular example right here utilizes an XML file, and so it actually makes it live. And this XML file defines the state data, or essentially the social graph information. And this is just purely for demonstration purposes. It has a user by the name of John Doe, and then there's a person Jane Doe. And you may think, okay, so then Shindig stores all of the information in an XML file? That doesn't make sense. This is only just for demonstration purposes. Inside of Shindig, you can actually customize this And instead of having it read the XML file, you can override or implement the interfaces so it can go out and talk to any data server. And later in this presentation, I'll show you what I did, where I created a MySQL connection for Shindig, and then instead of reading from an XML file, it goes out and just follows the same services, but it goes and talks to a MySQL database to interact with the data. And of course, with MySQL database, you have two-way communication. You can both insert, update, delete, as opposed to just reading from a static XML file. Okay? So, what else are we going to show you here? In addition to this particular sample container, there's a few other examples that you can get a feel for. And that's in this examples directory. So of course, there's these gadgets. So there's the social activities world, social hello world. That's the one that's running out of the box. But you can try out these different examples that are out of the box if you want to try them. There's also an OAuth example. I'm not sure if that's fully operational yet, but there's some instructions on how to play around with the OAuth functionality that's provided within Shindig that allows you to do secure transactions. So anyway, that's still, I've seen demos of it, but we still need to make it. We'll probably put together like a nice tutorial explaining step-by-step how to play with the OAuth integration within Shindig. And also, if I go into this other directory under container, you'll see there's various samples here as well. So here's a simple example of how to have two gadgets on the same page, or various other samples, 2 or 3. And so when you look at the source code, you can get a feel for how it is and how you can create your own OpenSocial container and how to render gadgets within it. So, okay. I'll come back to building and working around with Shindig in a second. Next time I'll show you my own version of Shindig where I customized it. All right. So before moving to SQL database integration, I'm going to start talking about another very important aspect of Shindig, and that is the REST API. Now, the OpenSocial specification provides 2 ways by which you can interact with an OpenSocial server. One way is by creating JavaScript applications known as gadgets that can programmatically access OpenSocial information. And then the other aspect of OpenSocial is by using the RESTful API. So in this case, you don't have to have JavaScript. You can just write some code that can initiate basic HTTP requests or REST requests. So like if you want to access people information or access a set of activities by different people, it's much easier in that sense. You just create whatever it needs to make a request out to the server, and then you can retrieve the data. And the data comes streaming back in 2 formats. One is either JSON, or the other data format is Atom. Okay? And so this makes it very easy to integrate with server-side technologies. So as you can see here, this is like a website running with the REST server, and then you have a website here that is consuming the technology. Okay. So how does it work? Well, since REST is just essentially a series of HTTP requests for getting and posting and so forth, here are the URLs that you would use to access the REST information. So, or the information via REST. So in this case, imagine if I have a website like mywebsite.com / Shindig server / and then I can put here /people / and then the global user ID of the particular person I want to query, as well as the actual user ID or as the actual specific data that you want to see. So the first URL is I want to see all of the people associated or connected to this particular user ID. Likewise, the second URL is like I want to see just the friends. So there could be it could actually be a subset of all the users. And then likewise, the third one is like if I want to pull up profile information for this particular user, I can just issue a request to that URL and be able to extract that information. And continuing on, that's for the people portion of the API. For activities, if I want to access activities, I could start executing requests on these types of URLs. So if I want to see the activities of this particular user, I would just have activities slash the user ID slash @self, and I would see all the activities that this person has been doing. I'll move on to the application data. So if I want to access persistent data, I can just utilize or execute these simple REST requests and be able to pull back the data for this particular user and see what the stored application or the stored persistent data on the OpenSocial server is like. Okay. And finally, there's an additional set of query parameters. So as I mentioned before, the data comes streaming back in either JSON, JavaScript object notation, or in Atom, essentially an XML format. It's typically used for XML feeds and so forth. So in this case, you can define what flavor of data you wish to have coming back, and then just by a simple parameter known as format. And then the other parameters, such as like fields, you can specify specific fields of the data you wish to extract. Likewise, you can set up paging mechanisms, like I want start page equals this, or I want only a page of data, for example. And then likewise, you can even set the count size. How many results do you want to be retrieved? So you can specify all that. So these are directly from the specification for the REST API. And like I said before, there's actually some initial running sets of code within Shindig that you can actually try out and play with to get a feel for how this works. Okay. So let me just go ahead and step down here and I'll do a demonstration of how to interact with the OpenSocial REST API. A little bit of background information. I actually took Shindig, actually a build from about a month ago, and I placed it onto my server because I have my own personal server that allows me to also run Java. And I took the Java version of Shindig and along with the REST API server patch plugged into it, and I hosted it on my own server. And I'll show you exactly how that works. Go to the host here where I have my server. And as you can see, the URL, it's somewhat long, but I have a Tomcat instance. So if you're familiar with Tomcat is a Java-based web server. And I just placed the web application, my Shindig web application inside here. And I'm just following the URLs as from the specification, where I have the people and then the user ID that I've set up for myself. And these are all the people that are connected to me within this particular installed version of Shindig. Now, as you can see there, I have some interesting friends that I've defined. So some of those are not actually real, but actually some of them are real. Some of these are my friends, and actually some of them, actually this is a co-author of mine where we wrote a book on Java technology a while back. But anyway, so this was interesting technology. Those are the different friends that I can query up, and then if I wanted to, I can also see activities. Now this one's risky because I'm typing it with one hand. So pardon me if I mess up. Okay, so there we go. So these are the activities of this particular user, Schalk. And things that he did recently. So actually they're getting a little bit old. So, but I did present on OpenSocial at Java 1 not too long ago, and then this was last year actually. So anyway, these were just some basic example stuff that I placed onto the server, so I can just show you how it works. And the data format that I'm using here, I'm actually pulling down the Atom data. So this is Atom data as it's coming streaming back to the server. And here, as you notice, I'm just using a browser to execute the request, but typically what you would do is, create the code on your server to initiate the GET request, and then parse the data on your own. So you could use, if you're using Atom, you could use a technology called Abdera to parse through the Atom data as it comes streaming down. Likewise, if you're using the JSON data output, there's downloadable utilities for parsing and extracting data from the JSON format and plugging it into server-side languages like Java or Python or what have you. Okay. Also, a very important thing about this is that if you notice here, I'm just doing live queries on data, meaning that anyone could access the data, and so that may look insecure. But just so you know, this is purely a demonstration. And later on, when I get back, I'll turn on the OAuth integration, so then I can show you the additional bit of transaction that allows you to have a secure transaction. So that way, this particular data is actually secured, and you're not actually exposing, this type of social graph data just openly on the internet. But anyway, that's OAuth, and it's built into Shindig. All right, let me shift back over to my presentation. So the next question is integrating to your own external data. So this is very important. As you saw earlier in the example, I was just using stored state data. Better stand up again. So in the previous example, I was just showing that sample container, which it used like a state file. It was just an XML file, but typically you would want to integrate it into a backend solution. So how would you do that? How would you actually plug in Shindig to talk to a backend database or a backend data source? So in this case, it's relatively straightforward, and I'm going to lead you through the steps that you would go through to do that. First of all, you can, and this is a little bit more on the Java side, but the way the Shindig is architected, it provides three main services. These are the people service, the activity service, and the data service. And on the Java side, these are surfaced as Java interfaces. And all you really have to do is implement these interfaces and create your own version of these services. And your own versions can then tie into whatever native data source that you have. So in my case, I have a SQL database, and I want to have code that actually goes, instead of reading an XML file, it'll actually execute using JDBC and talk to my MySQL database. Or it could be any SQL database for that matter. So here's a bit of the code. This is literally the code that comes with Shindig. This is an interface people service, and I won't get into all the details, but just the main idea is that it provides the main infrastructure or the connection point, and then you can, just using standard object-oriented programming, build your own implementation. So here's what I did. I created a SQL people service that implements people service, and it goes through and it calls and it allows you to get the people or get the different information. And the way it does it, it's just, like I said, it uses standard Java database connectivity protocols. And the other thing is it ties into another technology known as Juice. So if you ever heard of Google Juice, it's a bit of Java technology that allows you to essentially manage your server-side data. So it's DI, dependency injection framework. So it's a fairly popular or a fairly important bit of technology that a lot of server-side people are now implementing. So Google Juice is a technology that was built by a Google software engineer, Crazy Bob, and it's actually integrated within Shindig, and that's how you plug in my custom implementations for the people service, the data service, and the activity service, and I just bind that to the interfaces, and then it becomes live. And that's all I had to do. Was I created my own implementations, bound it in the Juice configuration module, and then once it's live, it starts querying the database. All right. So let me just show you a little bit of the code and how it's working now. So in this case, I happen to have a build that I patched. And before, actually, as I started up, I'm going to go ahead and show you the patch information. So while that's starting, I'm going to go over to, I'll have to put this down for a second, sorry. So I put together a couple of tutorials, and I'll make sure that you guys can see this later on, but one is like data integration, like how to integrate Shindig within a database. And this is stuff I've shared with the Shindig development community, and so if you want to see more of this and converse on how to integrate with this, feel free to join the Shindig development community and discuss it. But I essentially donated this tutorial to them, and it explains all the specific details on how you can use this code But I'll show you very quickly how you can get up and running. All I really did was I created this patch. It's a SQL patch, and you download it, and then you unzip it, and then you apply the patch using the instructions that I posted here. And once you've applied the patch, you then have a customized version of Shindig that can talk to a MySQL database. So I definitely recommend if you want to try that out. I can also make sure you have the URL for this particular patch. Then you'll be able to do what I'm about to show you now. So now that I have this patched version of SQL, or Shindig that talks to a SQL database, let's go ahead and go to my website here. I'll just open up a new window and do localhost gadgets. So there's the sample container that I showed before. But the cool thing about this is that you'll notice here in the console, I've had it pipe out the actual queries that I'm doing to the database now. So all the data information is stored within the database. Now the other thing I did was inside the patch I included a simple version of this container web page. And there you can, it's a little bit easier to use. So I added some new users like Mickey Mouse, for example. And as you can see, Mickey Mouse has some friends, Donald Duck, Minnie Mouse, and so forth. And so in this case, you can see the queries going on in the database. So it's pulling out the social graph information from the database now. Likewise, I also preloaded some different examples. So if you remember that real simple hello world for OpenSocial, list friends, I also included that as part of the patch. I'll reinitialize that. So now I'm looking at the friends of Mickey Mouse and so forth. And then also if I want to load a simple activities. So here's that simple activities example. If you were here earlier, I showed this gadget running within the Orchid container. But here I'm going to run it within my own version of Shindig. And I'll type it there. So hello type A. I'll post the activity. And the activity has been posted, meaning that on the back-end server side, I'm actually inserting the activities into a database table called activities. And so it's up to the provider to do what they want with these activities. So in the case of Orchid, it takes those activities and surfaces in the user interface and calls them updates. And then people can query the updates that they've been doing or their friends have been doing and so forth. So that's pretty much it for that one. That's pretty straightforward. So I'm going to go ahead and try to wrap up fairly quickly here. But before wrapping up, essentially Shindig is very successful. We have High Five as a prime example of the success of Shindig. They have literally 300 billion hits per month, or 1 billion hits per day, or 30 billion hits per month and 1 billion per day. They have over 800 apps and hundreds of developers that are globally developing OpenSocial applications. And oh yes, and before finishing, you may be asking, well, what about the PHP version of Shindig? What can you do with that? Well, this is actually really cool. If you're a PHP developer and you already have Apache and PHP version 5.2.x, meaning like whatever version after that, you can utilize the PHP version of Shindig. And one of the really cool things about it is that there is an existing reference implementation of the PHP version. So it's an actual example website called Partusa. And Partusa is something that you can actually try out. And the Partusa is hosted on the Google projects page, and the URL is code.google.com/p/Partusa. And the cool thing here is that not only can you download all the code to get this example website running on PHP, but you can also interact with a live demo. And so, to give you a feel for what that's like, I think I have the browser still handy. Sorry, I have all my previous demos. It's been quite hectic. Here, 1 second. So there's the open source project website for Partusa. And then if you click here, you can go into the live demo. And since I'm already signed in, I see that I have my one friend. Oh, yeah, that's a little error that he needs to fix. So the guy who implemented it, his name is Chris Chabot, and I actually have him as a friend. He's a really nice guy. He's coming from the Netherlands. And the cool thing is that I can do the same kind of things that I was doing before, or if I want to add an application, in this case I'm going to add that real basic hello world for OpenSocial, the list friends, and I can add it right there. I think I added it twice, but anyway. And now it's running right there, and there's my friend, my single friend, Chris Chabot. But anyway, this is like a running instance of Partusa. You can try it out and see what it's like, and you can also, if you're familiar with PHP coding, you can get a feel for what it's like to build that, to play with that technology. Okay, so just to wrap it up, in summary, with Shindig, you're utilizing a lot of both technology, and you're also touching into a very large developer network. So you can reach hundreds and thousands of developers around the world, but you can also, more importantly, reach millions of users around the world. So I mentioned this several times already. There's over 275 million users today of OpenSocial applications that you can actually connect with using this technology. And like I said before, the way you would go about it, you could either write your own server, or you could use a service like Friend Connect, or you could actually just leverage and extend Shindig to suit your own needs. So anyway, with that, I would like to go ahead and finish up and say, of course, it's just shake and open it up for questions and answers. Thank you. So do you have the microphone available for some questions? And we also have Conway. Conway is here. He's going to be transferring or working in Beijing, but he's going to be helping out the Asian market.
Chris, very nice talk.
Oh, thank you.
I have one question. So the data that are stored, for example, for a particular social website, that will be stored on the site that's running the Shindig server?
It could be. I mean, in reality, if you're in a large professional setup, you would have multiple servers and they would be clustered, and you could have separate data servers that could specially host the social graph data. So it could be on the same site, it could be on separate sites, but yeah.
Okay, so in some sense, it's actually able to, you can have a distributed store.
Sure. Just like any like large installation of a web application, they tend to get distributed over a farm of servers to have maximum performance. And like Hi-Fi, as an example, they have everything's memory cached, and there's a whole bunch of high-end type of approaches that they can achieve maximum performance for billions of users across on a day-to-day basis. So yeah.
Okay. And how feasible do you suppose that this can be deployed maybe in peer-to-peer fashion?
In a what?
In peer-to-peer fashion on the client's computer.
So peer-to-peer means
in terms of the users, they might participate in some kind of network that will host a network together, sort of outrunning their own individual servers.
That's an interesting
thoughts been given to this prospect or direction?
To be honest, I haven't really heard much on that, but I can see what you're saying. Yeah, it's conceivable, but I mean, I'd be interested to chat with you a little bit more about that. Internally, I haven't really heard, unless you've heard of that, Conway, like peer-to-peer installations of Shindig for transactions. I mean, typically we've done it like client-server, like you have your gadgets. The gadgets are built and they're hosted on a social networking site, and they tie into the main container site. Or people just build their own container sites, but actually having multiple peer-to-peer instances of Shindig servers. I haven't really heard of that. I'm not sure if it would easily fit into the technology that we have today, but it's always worth chatting about.
Thank you.
Any other questions so far? Okay. Well, anyway, I'm here. If you were here before, my backpack fell over, and I have all my stuff, my business cards. So you can get the American business cards or the Japanese business cards. But I'm here to chat with you if you guys want to come by and ask more questions. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for sticking through 2 hours of back-to-back presentations.